What's up guys, Austin Brady here, and in today's video, we're gonna be unboxing and reviewing the iPhone 14 Pro. This is a pretty controversial upgrade. There's been a lot of new features and a lot of things that have stayed the same. We'll be going over all of that, and at the end, I'll be talking about how I personally use the iPhone and if I regret upgrading. So let's talk about what stayed the same. The iPhone 14 Pro comes in silver, gold, space black, and a new deep purple. Space black is technically new, but not much has changed from previous black or gray models. So unless you really like deep purple, it's not gonna be a game changer for you. You will notice that on the back, the camera bump is slightly bigger. If you're coming from an iPhone 11 or 12, it will be noticeable, but from a 13, not much has changed there either. As for design, it has a ceramic shield front, which is a really tough glass. And then it has a matte glass back, which is really nice for hiding fingerprints. What doesn't hide fingerprints is the stainless steel band on the outside. Unfortunately, I wish there was an upgrade there. I'm not really a fan of the stainless steel edge that the 12, the 13, and now the 14 Pro has, but what can you do? As for storage, we have 120 gigabytes up to 1 terabyte storage. As for the display, we have the Super Retina XDR display, which has the 6.1 inch screen size. You're gonna see a slightly thinner edge around the outside, but it really isn't noticeable. As for screen refresh rate, still 120 Hertz with the ProMotion technology, which essentially means it'll go from 1 Hertz up to 120 Hertz, depending on what you need, what task you're using on your iPhone. I'm coming from an iPhone 11, so I noticed instantly that ProMotion, that 120 Hertz is really smooth. It makes your experience a lot better. But if you're coming from a 12 or 13, it's not gonna be much different. As for screen resolution, screen contrast, and screen colors, those specs are basically the same. You're gonna have slightly more pixels just because there's a little bit more screen on the edge. As for weight, it's 206 grams, which is not much more than previous models. I came from an iPhone 11, so it was significantly heavier for me. Water resistance is still rated the same. Battery life, it claims 1 extra hour, so not much improvement on the battery life. Apple boasts a new A16 chip, which is supposed to be better, but they didn't compare it to the previous model. They compared it to a generation's old model, the A13 Bionic. So with similar specs, I'm not expecting it to be that much better. Okay, so that's what stayed the same. What's changed? Right out of the box, you're gonna notice that the screen brightness is significantly better. It has 1000 nits max, but in outdoor situations, it has a 2000 nits peak, which is a game changer when you're using your phone outside. As for the SIM card, I don't have the international model, so the iPhone 14 Pro came with an eSIM, which at first was kind of weird, trying to set up my eSIM. It took a little bit of time, but it wasn't that difficult to figure out. I anticipate this transition to eSIM will become even easier when upgrading to new phones in the future. Just at first, it was a little rocky. Another new feature is emergency SOS via satellite, which is an awesome feature for those who spend a lot of time outdoors in remote locations and just don't have cell phone service. I don't anticipate this being worth the upgrade though, just a nice perk. Another new feature is crash detection, which has had mixed reviews. I think it's awesome to be able to have another safety feature in case you are in a car accident. I've been in car accidents before, and that would be a really nice assistant, be able to immediately call emergency services. The unfortunate thing though is it's not perfect yet. A lot of people have reported on roller coasters that it called emergency services and they weren't in a car crash. So still some improvement to be made there. All right, now for the new feature, the dynamic island. So as you can see here at the top, we have this pill-shaped cutout. At first, I was skeptical. I didn't like having a pill-shaped cutout or a notch. I want us to move towards more of a Samsung type design where it's mostly all screen. With the dynamic island though, after using it for about a week, it's actually kind of fun to use. There's a lot of animations. It's a combination of hardware and software. So there's actually 2 cutouts. One is for sensors, one's for the camera, and then they have the rest blacked in with, they turn off the pixels, and it animates different things for Face ID, for music, for timers, for maps, for phone calls. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, and it makes using your phone a lot more convenient. I feel like it's a really fun way to interact with notifications and I'm excited to see where this goes in the future. Another new feature is the always on display, which makes me laugh because Samsung and other phones have had this option for years, but Apple's finally bringing it to the iPhone. Personally, I don't like always on display. When my phone's off, I want it to be off and I want it to stay off. So I disabled that feature immediately. That's not a reason why I upgraded to this phone, but for a lot of people who appreciate that feature, it can be nice to look at the time, see notifications, and they dim the screen that way that you're not having your battery drained as quickly, but it still is a battery drainer. So be aware of that you may not have as high performance on your battery. And now the upgrades that a lot of us are interested in, and that's in the cameras. The main camera, the ultra wide, the telephoto. There's a new 2x option, which we'll talk about, and the new selfie camera as well. So let's dive into the cameras. With the new main camera, they move from 12 megapixels all the way up to 48 megapixels with an aperture of 1.7. This is a huge increase when you're shooting RAW and is a great option for photographers, people who want that raw data. It does increase the file size though. Expect 60 to 100 megabytes per photo. And there's also a larger sensor, which is going to help with low light performance, depth of field, and just overall quality. In my testing, the results are pretty cool. Something else to be aware of, it's a little bit wider of a view than the previous main camera, which I would have preferred a tighter focal length. I don't use 24 millimeters very often. I'm usually around 35 to 50 for my photos, unless I'm doing portraits, then I'm all the way up to 70 or 80. So I wish we had had a tighter focal length, but it is nice having that increased megapixels and the larger sensor. As for the ultra wide camera, it's still 12 megapixels with an aperture of 2.2. They claim an increase in low light performance, but I haven't really noticed too much of a difference. And for the telephoto camera, again, not many changes, still 12 megapixels at an aperture of 2.8. There's no hardware changes, but there is a slight increase in software improvement, so that's good. Something I was really excited for was the 2x option. So essentially they take your 48 megapixels and they crop it down to 12 megapixels. So on your main camera, you can now have the equivalent of a 50 millimeter without necessarily digitally zooming in. It gives an optical like lens because it's still 12 megapixels at that 50 millimeter equivalent. Something I'm really excited about is the second generation optical stabilization. The first generation was incredible. This just improves upon that. Essentially that means that when you're taking video, it stabilizes the image similar to like a gimbal would, and I was really impressed. In some of my testing, I was walking around with my wife in the mall or just walking down the sidewalk filming cars, and I was not being careful with being stable. It was all over the place, and the image comes out very smooth, very stable, which brings us to another new feature, which is action mode. Now, disclaimer with action mode, quality is not going to be as good because in order to get the stabilization needed, it's going to crop in on the image, so you get a poor quality image. But if you want that very stable action footage, you now have that option. Similar to how Apple came out with cinematic mode and it was only 1080 at 30 FPS, which is not cinematic Apple, but they upgraded to now 4K at 24 frames per second in cinematic mode. So we're getting more cinematic in cinematic mode. Same with action mode. I'm sure they're gonna improve that in the future so the quality is good enough to be able to post or to put into your footage. As for now though, I'm probably not gonna use the action mode as much and just stick with regular stabilization because it's already so good. In just a second, we're going to talk about whether it's worth upgrading or if I regret upgrading. And to give you a little bit of context, this is where I'm coming from. I've used iPhones, I've had Samsung Galaxies, I've interacted with a lot of different phones from different companies. I've always loved Apple, and so I've had the iPhone 5, and then I had the iPhone 11, and now I'm upgrading to the iPhone 14 Pro. I use my phone every single day for calling, texting, communication, social media, things like that, like most people would. I also use the calendar quite a bit to keep my schedule organized. I use the Notes app a lot to organize communications with clients, future videos, task lists, shopping lists. Christmas is coming up. But on top of that, I'm also a content creator. So filmmaker, photographer, YouTuber, and it's really important to me to have a good camera on my phone. In my personal experience, I'm upgrading from an iPhone 11 to the 14 Pro. So that's a significant increase, not only in getting the Pro features, but also I'm skipping 2 phones. So for me, it was well worth the upgrade. And so far, I do not regret upgrading. Okay, who is this phone for? So the iPhone 14 Pro, if you're coming from an 11 or older, 100% you should upgrade. it's worth the $1,000+ to get the dynamic island, the camera features, the refresh rate for ProMotion. The new square design looks so clean, it's aesthetic. If you're coming from a 12 or 13 Pro, really stack up what's most important to you. If you're the kind of person that really loves cutting edge camera technology, maybe, or if you like having the new look of an iPhone and flexing it to all your friends, then yeah, go ahead and upgrade. But when it comes to most of the features that you're gonna use every single day, there's not a significant increase in value to justify the upgrade, especially from the 13 Pro. So I would totally wait for the 15 or the 16 that's coming out next year and the year after that, and see what type of features and upgrades come then. But really at this point, that's my suggestion for you. All right, that's all I've got for you for the iPhone 14 Pro. If you like the video, you could subscribe, or you could like the video, or comment, or just ignore it. That works too. I didn't spend hours making this video or anything, so. Just kidding, we'll see you guys in the next one. I got anywhere from 60 up to 80 megapixels. I got from 60 up to 80 megapixels? Megabytes.